Shalom and welcome to the Israel Policy Pod. I'm Neri Zilber, a journalist based in Tel Aviv and a policy advisor to Israel Policy Forum. As promised, we have one more episode for you before the end of the year, and it's a good one. Our dear friend Milshtein is back with us to talk all things Gaza. Where do things stand now on the ground after over 2 months of ceasefire, just ahead of next week's expected meeting in Florida between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Donald Trump, and before what many people expect will be a move to phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire deal in the new year? Lots to discuss with Michael, who is of course a colonel in the IDF reserves and the head of the Palestinian Studies Center at the Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University. Michael was also previously the head of the Palestinian Arena in military intelligence here in Israel and an advisor to the IDF general responsible for the Palestinian territories. This will actually be, in actual fact, our last episode of the year, so we'll see you all in 2026. But before we get to Michael, we have to send our thoughts and prayers and condolences to all those killed and injured in the horrific terror attack in Sydney, Australia, 8 days ago. We're recording this on Monday evening Tel Aviv time, so Hanukkah just ended here in Israel. I think the memory of the tragic Sydney attack on the first night of Hanukkah 2025 will be with us for a very, very long time. After the attack, I saw an image shared online which went viral, or went viral again. It's not a new image, far from it. You already know the one. It's a black and white picture of a menorah sitting on a windowsill of an apartment. In the background across the street, you can see a Nazi flag flying above a building. Turns out the picture was taken during Hanukkah 1931 in the northern German city of Kiel. What I didn't know until last week, though, is what the taker of the picture, Rachel Posner, the wife of the local rabbi, had inscribed on the back of the picture, the actual physical picture, for those youngins listening. The inscription went thusly: "Death to Judah, so the flag says. Judah lives forever, so the light answers." That's what Rachel wrote on the back of the picture, an act of what I can only describe as lyrical defiance. I never knew that. I never knew about the inscription. I also never knew what the fate was of the taker of this famous picture. So one deep dive later, last week, I found out. Rachel Posner and her husband, Rabbi Akiva Posner, and their 3 children fled Germany in 1933 and made their way to mandatory Palestine, later on to become the future state of Israel. They, the Posners, thankfully got out and were saved, unlike millions of others who weren't so fortunate. Now, I'm telling you all of this not as a warning to come make Aliyah, far from it, believe me, but I was struck really by the second half of the story of this famous menorah picture and the Nazi flag that seldom gets told. I didn't know about it. The Posners found sanctuary when needed in the Holy Land, in the future Jewish state, when one of the most civilized and modern European states, Germany, descended into madness. And also, by the way, when much of the rest of the world barred its doors to the Jews who were desperate to find such sanctuary. So that, in a nutshell, is a promise and ideal of Israel and of Jewish self-determination, and yes, of Zionism. Not the caricature that some outside of Israel would have you believe, especially these days, and also some inside of Israel as well, who have taken Zionism and turned it into something unrecognizable. May the memories of all those lives needlessly stopped short, and tragically stopped short, in Sydney, Australia, be a blessing. Let's get to Michael Milshtein. Hi, Michael. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, Neri. Thank you for having me again.
It's really our pleasure, Michael, because last time you were on was way back in August, and a lot of things have changed and perhaps may still change in the coming days and weeks.
Sure.
So I really wanted to focus on Gaza and to have you back on to talk mostly about Gaza, I think, especially before Bibi Netanyahu heads to Florida to meet with Donald Trump yet again early next week. And perhaps before what many people imagine to be phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire deal. So a lot to talk about in this episode with you, Michael, and you're the perfect person to get into these issues with. But I wanted to actually take you back about 2.5 months, to look at the deal itself that ended the fighting in Gaza, at least for now. Things didn't look all that promising back in August when we were chatting.
Sure.
It was imminent escalation. Really, there was an operation into Gaza City in September, but really Donald Trump put an end to all of it quite suddenly. So were you surprised, number one, by the deal itself, and then number two, with the fact that we've had more or less phase one almost completed in the past, say, 2 months?
Yes. And, as you mentioned, Neri, actually 2.5 months after the ceasefire started, we actually understand better what happened and what actually happened behind scenes regarding the ceasefire. And, I think, first of all, I must say that personally, I was not surprised because of the ceasefire and because of the agreement of Hamas to accept the ceasefire, because, and I will speak about it immediately, I always said that if Hamas will get a very serious guarantees about the end of the war, Hamas will not have any problem to promote a ceasefire. Mm-hmm. And, we must be frank enough, I think, Neri, to admit or to speak about two points. First of all, I do think that there is a gap regarding the Israeli narrative about the end of the war. Many people in Israel, mainly because of political considerations, they describe the end of the war as a result of Israeli military pressure, and that Hamas actually became more flexible because of this military pressure. And this is the point when I say let's be frank with ourselves and let's speak in a very clear manner. Actually, until the end of the war, Hamas didn't wave a white flag, and Hamas didn't release any hostage except Idan Alexander, which was a kind of a gesture to Donald Trump, to President Trump.
The dual Israeli-American national that was taken captive.
Exactly.
The IDF soldier.
I think it was 5 months ago.
Right.
And by the way, Idan Alexander already joined. He is really a hero.
Rejoined
he joined the IDF
army.
gang. Yeah, and it's very impressive. And there is another point that once again we need to be very frank about it. There is a gap between the declarations of both Donald Trump and Netanyahu about the end of the war and what happened on ground. Because I do remember how Hamas response to the 20 points plan of Trump looked like. It was not a big yes. It was, let's call it, very close to no. Hamas didn't mention and still insist that they will not speak about disarmament of Gaza, of themselves. And it was, from a Trump point of view, it was enough. And it was the moment when he said, okay, it's enough, we will start the agreement. And that's why I think that there is no big surprise. And of course, if we really want to understand the reality in a very accurate manner, we cannot tell ourselves all kinds of fairy tales about how successful was the campaign and that Hamas actually gave up. No, it was something else, much more complicated. And, we speak about another conception, Neri, misconception, that was created here in Israel. Many people, actually the majority here in Israel, assessed that Hamas will never give up and will never release all the hostages. They will always keep the several hostages as cards. And actually, we found out that Hamas released almost all the hostages. We still have one hostage, one Gwili, and I think, it's a kind of commitment. It's about something that Israel must insist. But actually, Hamas proved that, they will not put any obstacle. And I once again, I said before the agreement that I will not be surprised if Hamas will release all the hostages. And once again, only if they will get serious, strong guarantees about the end of the war. And I assess, Neri, that they got it.
That they got it, right. I think the Americans, via the Turks and the Qataris and the Egyptians, gave that guarantee to Hamas.
No doubt.
No restart of the war. But on the issue of the deal, Michael, were you surprised that Israel was able to stay in 50% of the Gaza Strip, at least for the time being, that the demand on Hamas's side wasn't for at least an almost full withdrawal?
Yeah, this is, I think, when we speak about achievements or points that Hamas showed flexibility, so we can say that here there was a kind of a change, but we must also be very accurate and once again very cautious. We describe this yellow line that actually split Gaza to two as a kind of a new Berlin Wall that will stay for many years. And I'm not sure about it at all. We spoke about phase 2. I assess, I do not know for sure, but I assess that if President Trump is really eager and is really serious to promote phase 2, maybe Israel will stand in front of pressure very soon to expand the withdrawal, and maybe we will find ourselves not in the yellow line, but in the blue line, very close to the 67 borders. So, it's many things that seems to us as strategic achievements more than 2 months ago, maybe they're actually a kind of provisional developments, and maybe they will be changed very quickly.
So we'll definitely get into what may happen next week in the Netanyahu-Trump summit and what may or may not happen in the phase 2, including potential further IDF withdrawal from Gaza. But reading between the lines, Michael, it's a veiled criticism of a lot of what we heard here in Israel, especially by, say, right-wing analysts and media commentators and even government officials saying, we're agreeing to, quote unquote, stop the war for now, but the deal allows us to stay in Gaza forever, but we can keep hitting Hamas whenever we want, but et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As in, the deal was framed in a very positive light from the Israeli point of view, including, we just mentioned it offline, a very prominent Netanyahu ally in the media said, "Oh, there will never be a phase 2, so don't worry."
Yeah.
Right? This will be the status quo now forever. That's unlikely to be true. So
and I agree with you, Neri, and I really think that there is a kind of fundamental problem here in Israel that we cannot, or it's very difficult for many of us to describe reality in the accurate colors. And for example, if you will insist to describe the end of the war as victory or achievement, you will not be able really to understand in a very accurate manner what is happening right now. You will not be able to promote very accurate plans, and your whole strategy will be hollow. And for example, you spoke about the end of the war. We must, for example, understand that the end of the war came almost immediately after the failed attack in Doha, in Qatar. Mm-hmm. And it was a result of this failed attack. And it was a result of American massive pressure on Israel to end the war. And, if we will still stick this argument that the attack was wonderful and it was okay, no Hamas senior figure was killed in the attack, but it was very successful, and Qatar's impact in the Middle East now is much more limited. So, it's a kind of an illusion, and we will never be able really to create a realistic strategy and to create a very fruitful, a very serious discourse between the government and the public here in Israel.
Right. To level with the public, total victory, as the Prime Minister has been promising for 2 years before the ceasefire, was not achieved. And Michael, right. You've been on this podcast enough over the past 2 years to explain how decidedly unrealistic that bombastic
and we
was.
Both remember, Neri, that we said that this term, total victory, it's something that you cannot really achieve. It's not only a very tricky term, it's something that will really cause you damage. And that's what happened, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it was useful for this government politically to hold it out until it became non-operative when Donald Trump wanted to end the war before Hamas's, complete destruction, complete demilitarization, all of that, which we'll touch on in just a second. Michael, I'm curious to take us to the present. So the ceasefire has been in place, like we said, for 2.5 months. The IDF holds half of Gaza. This yellow line splits Gaza in half. The IDF sits on that line. One half of Gaza called the Green Zone, unfortunately by the Americans and others. Some call that New Gaza. That's Israeli held. Then you have the Red Zone, Old Gaza, which is very much Hamas held and increasingly more so, I would say, since the ceasefire took effect. But I wanted to start with the Israeli held part of Gaza, New Gaza, the Green Zone. What have we been seeing now for the past 2.5 months in terms of IDF activity? Obviously, there are still ongoing Israeli strikes into Hamas-held territory. Give us a sense, really, what has been happening there before a potential phase 2.
Yeah. So, actually, and I think that you described it correct, Neri. We are in a kind of a twilight zone between phase 1, which was not really ended, and as we mentioned, it is still very important to make sure that Ran Gvili will return. And actually, phase 2 is in front of us, but we're not really inside. We're not getting into phase 2. And actually, right now, there are two kinds, or let's say two situations in Gaza, the Palestinian side and the Israeli side. And here, we must speak about the data, the numbers behind the slogans and behind the terms. When we speak about the Palestinian side, 47% of Gaza territory, in this, of course, this is the territory that is being controlled by Hamas. Actually, 99.99% of the Palestinians, they live there. Actually, all the Palestinians are under Hamas control, and they are also under Hamas capability to shape their consciousness, their minds. And the rest, 43%, they are on the Israeli
53%.
control. 53%, sorry. And actually, we're speaking about almost an empty land. I mean, several thousands of Palestinians living all over there, all kind of militias, gangs, clans, of course, collaborators with Israel and their families. And, if we were all these ideas of creating a Gaza which will look like Singapore, and the other one that will be a kind of Somalia of Mogadishu, this is a good plan. This is actually a kind of an illusion. Because right now, there are two kinds of Gaza, but one is the real one, I mean, under Hamas control, and the other one is a kind of provisional land. And as you mentioned, every day there are clashes, and every day, mainly nearby the yellow line, IDF attacks Hamas members or Hamas cells which actually trying to cross the line. So it's not a very stable ceasefire, and there is an attempt of Israel to shape the rules of the game right now. For example, the killing of Raed Said, number 2 in a Hamas military wing, almost 2 weeks ago. It was an attempt to show that Israel can commit in Gaza the same policy that we promote in Lebanon. I mean, that we attack any kind of threat or a challenge that we will identify, even if it's not a kind of a ticking bomb. So, when I'm trying right now to focus on the Palestinian side, on Hamas side, and once again, I think it's a very important point, Neri, we must say the truth. We must be frank, and we must be very accurate.
Yeah.
In this territory, Hamas is the prominent player. Hamas is the one who rules, who manages this area, the public sphere. Of course, all the places, all the sites where consciousness is being created. I mean, mosques and media and schools, which are most of them are ruined, but Hamas actually reopened the education system and the universities. They are all held by Hamas, and there is a very important effort that Hamas promotes to actually a kind of a reconstruction of the military wing. By the way, Right Side, who was killed, he was responsible for this effort. I mean, once again, to create units, to nominate new commanders, to recruit new members. And right now, it's almost number one mission, number one target from a Hamas point of view. So, 2 years and 2 months after this war started, right now, and it's very sad to say that, but we must admit that Hamas is the one who rules, who controls the Palestinian side.
Right. We have to be clear-eyed, and that's why we love to have you on, Michael. I wanted to unpack a few things there, just starting from the Israeli-held part of Gaza. So we see continued effort to find and locate and destroy tunnels. Still, like you said, over 2 years after the war started, still tunnels. Yeah. By the way,
and Neri, by the way, you mentioned tunnels. According to IDF reports, right now IDF destroyed only something between 40 to 45% of the tunnels in Gaza. So we still have a lot of work regarding this issue in Gaza.
No, it's truly mind-boggling, the extent of what Hamas built there over 17 years.
17 years
of rule. But the point is that this is kind of areas like Rafah, like Bet Hanun, like Sajaiya, which Israel has gone into multiple times over the past 2 years, and still tunnels are being found, tunnels are being blown up. So I think it's very important to kind of emphasize that for our listeners and viewers. But I'm curious, why the continued clashes on the yellow line between IDF and Hamas? I mean, what is Hamas trying to accomplish by getting near to the yellow line, by trying to cross the yellow line? How do you understand that as a military professional?
So I assess that there are two reasons or two motives behind the Hamas efforts. First of all, maybe they are trying, to get back to all kind of military sites that they still got in the Israeli side, and to get out of them, weapons, if there is a kind of a weapon storage or a place that they know that there are still rockets or RPGs or any kind of rifles, they want to get them out. And we mentioned that Israel is trying to shape the rules of the game. So I think that Hamas also has an attempt to do that, and for example, to determine to make all kind of violations, or to promote all kind of violations, and to see what will be the Israeli response for that. And right now, and I'm quite satisfied that Israel is very serious about it. I mean, every time when IDF or the Shin Bet recognize a kind of a violation, crossing the yellow line, of course, a plan to attack Israel by rockets or by any other means, and even weapon smuggling, Israel attacks. By the way, exactly like it is being done in Lebanon against Hezbollah.
Right.
And this is the right thing to do. The main question here, and we saw what President Trump's response was after Right Side was killed, was a kind of question mark about the future.
The Americans weren't too thrilled. They weren't too thrilled about it.
And this is the main, it's a kind of a challenge and a kind of dilemma for Israel regarding the future. Will Israel be able really to repeat this attack of, for example, against senior figures in Hamas in the future, President Trump will permit Israel to promote such moves. For example, if he will announce that phase 2 already started and we are in a kind of a new reality, I'm quite sure that there must be a kind of a very serious dialogue between Israel and the American administration about it before we will find ourselves in all kind of very problematic situations when we will see Hamas getting stronger. We will see new headquarters, new commanders, new units, and we will not be able to attack them. And we actually will witness a kind of recover or a kind of reconstruction of Hamas in Gaza.
So this brings me to my follow-up question about the present and also looking at the future, Michael. Look, Hamas crawled out of their tunnels, and like you said, they reasserted control, and especially over the population and over the economy, over the schools and mosques. And they also went after any opponents and dissidents. And we saw very gruesome videos and images of people getting executed in the streets. So is there no pocket of resistance, opposition in old Gaza or even new Gaza to Hamas rule? I mean, the organization has been weakened over two plus years of fighting the IDF. But you're saying that, they're I don't want to say back to business as usual, but they're reconstituting themselves.
Yeah. And, I will answer in a very, very short manner, Neri. No, Hamas today has no challenge. I mean, no serious challenge. Of course, not in the Palestinian side. And you mentioned all these brutal executions of, by the way, they were not only collaborators. There were all kinds of clans and gangs that dared to challenge Hamas during the war. They were involved in looting humanitarian aid, and they created all kind of independent enclaves, mainly in Gaza City. And Hamas immediately after the ceasefire started, they made it very clear. Everyone who is involved in such things, he will be executed. So right now, we cannot speak about any kind of enemy, any kind of rival to Hamas in the Palestinian side. In the Israeli side, and right now, at this point, I was very critical, and I will be very critical.
Continue to be critical.
Without criticism, we cannot really, once again, promote any kind of realistic policy. About a year ago, Israel decided to promote a kind of project of supporting clans, supporting gangs, supporting militias like the Abu Shabab in Rafah area. Mm-hmm. And there was a kind of ideology behind this project that maybe they will be the alternative to Hamas. They will represent a kind of a new ideas, new ideology, much more moderate, and they will bring peaceful, calm, new, positive reality to Gaza. And it's okay to cause a damage to your enemy, but don't create illusions. All these gangs, or actually almost all these gangs, first of all, they are very weak. We speak about something between several hundreds to, the maximum several thousands of members. I mean, a lot of groups. They are not united. All of them are, their basic reputation in the Palestinian discourse, in the Palestinian street, is very negative as collaborators. Many of them were involved in criminal activities. Many of them were involved in terror attacks against Israel. And, I really don't understand how in the Israeli decision making circles, we decided that, they will challenge Hamas. And, it shows, I think, this is my assessment, Neri, it's a kind of a proof or reflection to two problems. First of all, is that we learn nothing from history. You know, in our own history, in the Israeli history, we had many cases like the Abu Shabab. I mean, the phalanx in Lebanon and the South Lebanese army, and the association of the villages in the West Bank, and you know, they all failed, they all collapsed, and you know, it was not a surprise for someone who insisted to learn from history. And the second thing, you know, it seems that during the war, mainly the last year of the war, Israel actually, or the Israeli policy, relied on fantasies instead of realistic strategy. You know, the issue with the clans, with the militias, was one of many fantasies in the Israeli strategy. We were speaking also about the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, collapsed totally 2 minutes after the ceasefire started. The belief that Trump's vision, or you know, the original vision of Trump to evacuate all the Palestinians from Gaza and to create a kind of Mediterranean Riviera in Gaza. So there are many people in Israel who still believe that, yeah, it's very likely to implement this idea, and the humanitarian city. And, you know, I think, Neri, that in a deeper manner, it showed, or it's a kind of a reflection of the fact that the basic failures, the roots of the failure of October the 7th was never investigated. I mean, there was no commission of inquiry. And if you will not really understand what were the roots of the failure, you will repeat these failures, you will copy them, and you will find yourself once again in new disasters. And I think that if you will check carefully and analyze the roots of the new failures, I mean the gangs and the militias and the GHF and the humanitarian city, you will see that many of them are exactly like the roots of October the 7th. I mean, the belief that you can engineer reality and that you can really change the minds of people with by using money and economy. And you know, it really it shows that you didn't really improve your basic understanding about Hamas, about Gaza Strip, about the Middle East.
So that's both a very good and very bad transition to look ahead at the future.
Israel Policy Forum is a policy organization rooted in the Jewish community. Our mission is to build support for a secure, Jewish, democratic Israel through a viable resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, advancing pragmatic U.S. policy towards the conflict, U.S.-Israel relations, and regional diplomacy among policymakers and community leaders. We promote policy measures endorsed by credible security experts, develop analysis and commentary, and convene programs that engage and educate leaders across the political, denominational, and generational spectrums. Our Young Professionals Initiative, IPF at Teen, works to elevate the discourse among next-generation leaders by building community and facilitating engaging programs related to Israeli-Palestinian affairs. To learn more about our work, visit us online at israelpolicyforum.org and follow us on social media. If you rely on Israel Policy Forum for credible and nuanced analysis, please make a tax-deductible gift today at ipf.li/supportthepod or at the Support the Show link in the show notes.
I'm very curious. I mean, maybe you already gave the answer, but in terms of this U.S.-led push to actually get phase 2 going, and everyone that I've spoken to, at least in the American side, is adamant that there will be a phase 2, whether in terms of governance, the establishment of a board of peace to help run Gaza, the raising of a multinational peacekeeping force, the ISF, the International Stabilization Force, that countries will volunteer troops and that it will be deployed also in January, reconstruction, Hamas disarmament, further IDF withdrawal. I mean, all of this, according to the actual plan, will be part of phase 2. Now,
that's right.
You know, the Americans are nothing if not big thinkers. And so they remain optimistic. But in terms of our actual lived reality in the Middle East, Michael, I mean, you know, just your first initial thoughts about what the Americans want to do as part of phase 2. Are you cautiously pessimistic? Are you very pessimistic? I mean, I'm shading your answer a little bit, but I want to get your professional sense of, okay, in January, we may see some movement towards something. Will it work?
So, instead of being pessimistic or very pessimistic, I would try to be realistic.
Okay.
The only one who will decide if there will be phase 2 or if phase 1 ended and we're getting into phase 2 is Donald Trump. And we all already understood that sometimes the way that he understands reality is quite different from the Israeli way. I mean, right now I think that you cannot hide it. There is a gap between the Israeli and the American stand regarding the future of Gaza. Right now, the main willingness of Netanyahu is to return to war. I mean, if there was a kind of a green light from Donald Trump, I think that yesterday, he would return to war, and maybe even as Smotrich, the minister here in Israel, or Ben-Gvir, they still preach to occupy all Gaza, to annex many parts of Gaza. This is their basic wish. But on the other side, the Americans, I mean, Donald Trump, he is eager to show an achievement, historical, strategic achievement. And for example, there were a lot of gaps in this situation. We mentioned before, Neri, that even after Hamas answered or sent their response to Donald Trump and said we will never give up our weapons, Donald Trump said it's enough for me. We will continue. We will promote the ceasefire. Yeah. There were many other violations of this during the ceasefire. I mean, 3 IDF soldiers were killed in clashes inside Gaza, in Rafah area. And Donald Trump, I mean, the president of the United States, said no. It's not the end of the ceasefire. We will continue. There were several problems, but we will take care of them. And right now, I think that we here in Israel need to understand that once again, the Americans are eager. I mean, the American administration is eager to promote phase 2, even if there will be a lot of gaps and a lot of problems. For example, when we speak about the international forces that will be that are planned to be deployed in Gaza, so the basic image was divisions and thousands of soldiers chasing after Hamas, getting into the tunnels, taking the weapons, killing them. No, it won't happen. Maybe there will be much more limited units. The main problem, by the way, is what if some of these units will be Turkish? Turkey right now, Erdogan declares about it almost 2 or 3 months. He's ready to send his soldiers to Turkey, to Gaza. And, Netanyahu described this issue as a red line. But I didn't hear the American administration repeat this Israeli argument. I mean, it's a kind of an open case, a kind of a question mark. Regarding the disarmament of Hamas, I think that this is, the most complicated, even an obstacle. Right now, and you only need to hear what Hamas leaders say on public, and they declare in a very clear manner, we will never give up the weapons. And here there is a kind of a trick. I mean, those who are maybe affiliated with Hamas, like Turkey and like Qatar, but also Egypt, they are trying to find a compromise. They want to preserve the ceasefire,
right.
And they are trying to create a kind of a new equation. We will not, I heard several ministers of both Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt last week, and they said, listen, it's impossible to convince Hamas to give up their weapons. It won't happen. But we can convince them to give up the heavy weapons, which means rockets, maybe drones, and by the way, they almost don't have it anymore.
Right.
And they will be able to keep the other weapons, rifles, pistols, grenades. And Hamas didn't say no. And I think that they will try to convince President Trump that this is a good answer. And this is the implementation of what you, President Trump, said. And there is another point, the third one, and this is the establishment of a local government in Gaza. And this point is, from Hamas point of view, there is no problem at all. They already announced that they are ready to accept any kind of a new regime in Gaza, Palestinian one, of course, and they will not be a part of that. And, they agree, or they're ready to accept that only because one thing, they assess that it's not a threat from their point of view. I mean, they want to establish the same model as Hezbollah in Lebanon. I mean, a kind of a very weak formal government, and behind scenes that they will be able to preserve their impact, to preserve their weapons. And I think that this is the target that Hamas want to promote.
So a state within a state, a Hezbollah model. Yes, they've been saying for years, they're willing to hand over the keys to Gaza to let someone else pay the civil servants and keep the lights on, let them focus on what they want to focus on. But I'm curious,
and pay
yeah,
for,
and pay,
for
right.
everything.
Right. I'm curious, Michael. So this Egyptian idea of going after the demilitarization and demobilization of the heavy weapons, right? Will that not be good enough for both Israel and for you in terms of, reaching the goal of disarmament, which, even the Americans, the ever optimistic Americans say, okay, it's a precondition for everything else that we want to do in Gaza, real disarmament or at least demilitarization of Gaza. And there's a difference. So, is this Egyptian and / other idea not good enough, or like you said, is it a trick?
So, we said actually since the beginning of the war, Neri, that we always want to be realistic, and we do understand that almost since the beginning of the war, Israel stands in front of a T-junction with only two options. The two are bad, and we need to choose the least worst alternative. And right now, there are two alternatives. First of all, to occupy all Gaza, as Smotrich and Ben-Gvir demand. And, 2 months ago, it was a kind of, dilemma. Right now, when Donald Trump says one big no about this option, it's even risky. This option is very risky, and not only because of all the things or the damage that would cause to Israel from the economic, political, even the security points of view.
To restarting the war and going in and reoccupying everything, and as the prime minister here has said, disarming Hamas either the easy way or the hard way. So I think that's what he's alluding to, right? A renewed offensive to get the job done, to achieve total victory.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe you will be able to implement this target of, eradicating the governmental and the military capacities of Hamas, but you will pay such a heavy price. So I'm not sure it's really worth it. And the other option, and, I'm full of question marks, and I will be very cautious about it. Of course, it's not the ideal, not kind of utopic solution, is to accept phase 2, which will rely on the Egyptian ideas and, of governmental, a new government, which, let's be honest, it will be a kind of cosmetic cover. And Hamas actually will be able to stay and to even to be powerful in Gaza. But I think that at this point, after we described quite sad and negative situation, Israel need to insist on 4 principles and to make sure that they will be kept. First of all, the freedom of action. I mean, that Israel, exactly like in Lebanon, will be able to attack any kind of threat, and not only ticking bombs. And I think that the killing of Riot Side 2 weeks ago was a very good example for that. I think that Israel must insist, that mainly American forces will control Philadelphia Road. I mean, the borderline between Gaza and Sinai. This was the gate that was used by Hamas to smuggle, a huge arsenal of rockets and other weapons. And this was the measure. This was the way that they enabled them to turn themselves to an army.
Right.
So I think that we cannot speak, of course, not about Palestinian control over there, but on serious American control in Philadelphia Road and in Rafah border crossing. I think there are two vetoes that Israel must keep. First of all, a veto regarding any figure that will be nominated to the Palestinian government in Gaza, and that Israel will find and will show that is affiliated with Hamas, or maybe even a member of Hamas. And the other thing, the other veto is regarding the international forces. For example, we mentioned the Turks. Israel must insist that Turkey will not be, you will not see Turkish units, Turkish soldiers, Turkish weapons nearby the Israeli-Palestinian border. I think it's a kind of a risk. And I think that if Israel will promote clever, flexible, realistic policy, of course a dialogue, by the way, not only with the American administration, but also with Egypt, maybe Saudi Arabia. So maybe we can implement these four principles. And another thing, Neri, I think that if Israel will accept this very complicated situation in Gaza, it will enable Israel to promote efforts regarding two other strategic threats. I mean, Lebanon and Iran. You cannot really promote three arenas, three conflicts at the same time, and insist that you will, in every arena, you will implement all the goals you want. Right now, I think that Israel need to make it to prefer or to
prioritize
explain that Iran right now is the first priority from its strategic point of view, and then Lebanon, and then Gaza. But if we really want to focus and we really want that there will be a kind of international support and, of course, internal support of any future campaign, any future military effort in Iran and in Lebanon, so we must promote much more clever policy regarding Gaza.
Very, very interesting, and also a good point. After 2 years of a multi-front war, I don't know if it was sustainable a few months ago before the ceasefire, but to have it kind of be open-ended indefinitely, it seems like a lot to ask. Although, as you know firsthand, and as I've heard as well, I have friends who have been called up to reserves, whether in Gaza or in Syria. Still, so the war isn't over for them or their families.
No, it seems to me, I always describe it, Neri, as a kind of a roller coaster here. The life in Israel, like a roller coaster which never stops. Every day there is a new surprise, a new drama. So it seems that we're not we're even not close to the end of all these things. But once again, and this is my personal opinion, Neri, it's better to be realistic and sometimes to be very flexible than to be just and to demand that in every place and in every time you will implement all the goals you want. As we saw, sometimes it's only illusions.
Right. Only illusions. And also sometimes purposefully put out there as illusions for public consumption, whether here in Israel or in other places, in terms of what's either happening on the ground or what's been achieved. No need to expand on that, but I'm curious, Michael, in the vetoes that you listed, there's one veto that we've heard consistently from this Israeli government about any future post-war arrangement for Gaza, and that's a veto over any role for the Palestinian Authority in Gaza. Do you see that continuing to be the case? Because, as you know, as maybe our listeners and viewers are also aware, the veto of the Israeli government over any PA role is a major impediment, a major bottleneck for greater Arab involvement in, say, reconstruction or the international peacekeeping force. And yet, so far, Netanyahu seems to actually be holding to that line. Do you see him bending at all?
We must once again admit, Neri, that Israel and Netanyahu, they are not the one who decide about, for example, future involvement of the PA in Gaza. The one who really decide about it, and of course it will be a dialogue, and of course there will be a kind of a discourse between the sides, is Donald Trump. And we learned during the last 2 months that sometimes President Trump is taking care about American interests, and there is, there were several people here in Israel who created the misconception, a new one, that Donald Trump will permit Israel to do everything.
Right.
And we saw several times regarding the Palestinian issue that, for example, President Trump said one big no about the ideas of annexation in the West Bank. He also, when he presented his 20 points plan in the UN Security Council, he spoke about Palestinian state. He spoke about paving the way to Palestinian state. And, we see that there are several gaps, maybe, by the way, growing gaps between the American administration and the relations between Washington and the Arab world and Israel. And I'm quite sure that, as you mentioned, Netanyahu, he said no to Hamas and no to Abbas, Abu Mazen.
Mahmoud Abbas, yeah.
But maybe President Trump will be convinced by the Saudis, by the Egyptians, that a positive future scenario in Gaza must rely on the PA. And I think that it will be one big dilemma. And I think that, if President Trump will push this idea strong enough, I think that Israel will have to accept that. Maybe there will be all kind of tricky ways to describe local government with a symbolic relation to the PA or things like that. But finally, and I think that and personally, this is my opinion, it should be Israeli interest to push the PA to Gaza. I'm not naive. I really don't think that Abu Mazen is capable to solve all the problems of Gaza. By the way, he barely controls the West Bank. But symbolically, it would be very good to promote such a new alternative in Gaza, instead of the clans, instead of the militias, instead of the vacuum that many people in Israel spoke about. And of course, it's better than Hamas.
Yeah. I think you told me way back when, Michael, that essentially there are only two kinds of affiliations in Gaza. You're either Hamas or Fatah. Fatah is the movement that controls the Palestinian Authority. Very few others.
The ruling party, actually.
Yeah, the ruling party. And very few others are independents. And yes, it would solve a lot of diplomatic headaches in terms of post-war Gaza, but it would cause Netanyahu a lot of domestic political headaches. I think looking ahead to next month, I think the biggest challenges for Netanyahu in terms of his own political position here in Israel, number one, further withdrawal of the IDF, because he's promised a robust Israeli presence in Gaza forever. And that may not be the case, as we discussed before, and any role for the PA, because he's been adamant for 2 years, or over 2 years, that no Hamas and no Abbas. On those two issues, I'm going to be watching what happens in Mar-a-Lago very closely early next week. Michael, before we leave, I wanted to actually talk about the Lebanon front with you. We hear more and more chatter from here in Israel about the possible quote-unquote need to escalate attacks in Lebanon because the Lebanese army isn't getting the job done disarming Hezbollah in Lebanon as part of the ceasefire deal that ended the war there back in November of 2024, and that Israel is willing to kind of escalate in Lebanon even at the risk of multiple days of, say, open warfare. So how seriously do you assess this Israeli threat of doing more militarily in Lebanon and the threat of escalation really on the northern front after, most of the attention of the past year has not been on Lebanon. It's been in Gaza and then in Iran, also to a certain degree in the West Bank. So Lebanon kind of got lost in the shuffle for a year plus. Is it going to make a comeback?
It's a very, very serious dilemma, and I'm really concerned about what is happening in Lebanon, Neri. First of all, I think, and by the way, many Israelis think that the campaign in Lebanon against Hezbollah was the greatest strategic achievement of Israel during the war. I mean, Hezbollah was really number one enemy of Israel on the eve of October the 7th. And, it was this organization was almost smashed during the war. The military achievement was really dramatic, and all the operations were really brilliant. And we need to preserve this achievement. And Israel witnessed during the year since the ceasefire in Lebanon last November that although this organization, Hezbollah, suffered really very, very severe damage, this organization is trying to recover. He finds ways to get Iranian financial and military support, and I think that Israel cannot allow this scenario, and of course cannot wait for the Lebanese army. It's one big disappointment. By the way, there were so many hopes that Joseph Aoun, the new president, and the new government, and the American support, they will enable this entity. The government of Beirut to promote successful moves against Hezbollah, but unfortunately, they were all failed. I really hope that the diplomatic, political efforts that are being promoted right now, mainly, by the way, by the American administration, will succeed to promote. I will explain what is the target and what is the solution, I think, for the problem of Lebanon, to make sure that South Lebanon, between the river of the Litani and the Israeli border, will be clean of Hezbollah, will be clean of military threats of Hezbollah. And I think that Israel needs to give the political, diplomatic effort a chance. Maybe something will happen, because I don't think that Hezbollah right now really wants dramatic or broad escalation. But if not, and if it will not succeed, I think that Israel will have no choice but to promote ground maneuver, limited one, to the places nearby the border, to South Lebanon, to make sure that all the places nearby the border, they are clean of threats. And I think that in order to promote this dramatic move, we first of all must have a kind of internal legitimacy, and I'm quite sure that the Israeli public stands behind such a move, in contrary to Gaza.
Right.
And of course, we need international support, and mainly American support. And we are getting back to Gaza. We will not be able to get such a support and also, of course, the support that is needed in order to promote moves against Iran, if we will still be very stubborn and we will stick in all kind of not very important issues regarding Gaza. So, you need to maneuver, and you need once again to prefer and to determine what are the first priority targets, arenas. And once again, I do think that Lebanon and Iran, they are the most important right now. And only after that, Gaza. And of course, we can speak after that about Syria and Yemen and even the West Bank. But first of all, the two arenas that were left open, I mean, Iran and Lebanon, we must make sure that we will not return to the same period like on the eve of October the 7th.
So with that very sober assessment, we'll have to end it there, Michael. I think we could go for another half an hour just talking about Lebanon and Iran like we did in Gaza, but we'll save that for next time. This is the last episode of 2025. So, we were all hoping for, let's say, a quieter and saner 2026.
Sure.
But we could only hope, I suppose.
Let's hope.
Let's hope. So thank you as always, Michael, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thank you once again for having me, Neri.
My pleasure. Take care. Okay, thanks again to Michael Milshtein, as always, for his generous time and insights. Also, a special thanks to our producer, Jacob Gilman, our editor, Tracy Levy, and our assistant producer, Adam Jesselson, as always, and to all of you who support Israel Policy Forum's work. 'Tis the season, as they say, so do consider making a donation to Israel Policy Forum so keep being a credible source of analysis and ideas on issues such as these that we all care deeply about, including this podcast. And most importantly, thank you for listening, and a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year upcoming to all those celebrating.